Are you thinking about writing a fantasy novel? Well, how about some tropes for you to embrace or avoid? Hi, I'm Marcus, and I'm the idiot on the writer's block. If you're new to the channel, I, the idiot, ask experts for tips on how to write, publish, and promote my first fiction novel. Check this link right here to get a playlist of all the questions that I've already asked. And I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like, shared it with your friends, and subscribe for expert tips on how to write, publish, and promote your first fiction novel. LiteraryTerms.net describes fantasy derived from the Greek word meaning make visible. The genre of fiction that concentrates on imaginary elements like magic, alternate worlds, superheroes, magical creatures, and monsters like vampires. Yes, I said it. Vampires are fantasy. Werewolves, though, are real. I should know. I'm 1/8 werewolf. And since my first fiction novel, Atticus the Mighty, is an upper middle grade contemporary fantasy, I'd like to see if I've used any common tropes that appear in fantasy writing. So that's the question on the writer's block this week. What are some tropes that an aspiring fantasy writer should embrace and also should avoid? And here are experts giving us some fantasy tropes to embrace and to avoid.
So I am better at things that you should probably avoid right now. Because tropes that they should embrace is all of the tropes are dependent on the cyclic nature of publishing. So everything that happens in publishing has a cycle. It goes out of popularity and it'll come back in, a couple years later. It's like, why are vampires so hot right now? I don't know. I don't like them. I've never liked them. This is not a thing. Don't pitch me vampires. Go to Rebecca Potos. But they're coming back in style right now for whatever reason. So a lot of the tropes that you should embrace are things that, come in and out of style, but by the time you write them, they're already out of style. So embracing tropes, because of that is probably not the best idea. So I always say, embrace whatever tropes you're feeling. If you want to write about this, then write about it. I'm like, if you have to shelve it for a couple years until it comes back into style, then shelve it for a couple years and then pitch it to your agent, hopefully by the time you do write it, it'll be in style or it'll be so different and so refreshing that someone will want it. But things to avoid right now in fantasy, like royalty, princesses, I'm really tired of princesses. I can't stand So there's nothing else to say. I'm so tired of it. It was so popular in the rise of young adult fantasy that I'm done with it. It's been popular for 10 years and I don't want it anymore. I'm not a fan of, we as a society have a tendency to constantly have a male figure, whether it's subconsciously or anything of the sort, continuously saving the female character in some way, shape, or form, whether it's allowing her to recognize her emotional, growth, or helping her become a sword fighter or anything of that sort. And that has passed at this point. We've had all those books. Every kind of male figure, teaching you something about yourself as a female is it's done. We're a lot more independent and individualized as both women and men, that I don't think we need the opposite gender or any kind of love interest to really force us to kind of, grow in that sense. And it should be a lot more individualized at this point. So obviously we have, our interior and exterior stakes here, talking about drive, which we'll get to probably eventually, but you want to make sure that your character is growing on their own, based on their own journey, and not that, a character outside of them is forcing that. So, because that's where you get to inauthenticity. And though it's normal in our everyday lives to have people influence us, it's more of a realization of our own that we're growing. And that's what forces us to grow in the direction that we want. So rather than having characters, which we a lot of times do, come in for the sake of helping our character growth. We can't have that in books anymore. It's just a tired trope, and it's tired to kind of have like a character be there for the sake of just your main character's growth. But yeah, so being a little bit more individualized would probably be a good idea. Self-realization in characters, and their drives as well. So, but royalty, done. There's nothing else to say about it. I don't know. So, and I honestly, something I am seeing right now that's coming back a little bit is a new take on like old school fantasy. So, and when I say old school fantasy, I'm kind of actually talking about like kind of like newer creatures and things like that. You know, like the old school type of world building, but done with a voice that's contemporary, you know, things like that. Although fantasy, because of COVID, who was coming, is not right now very popular. It's not selling well because it costs more money to make. And a lot of people want happy, you know, fluffy things right now, which is not me. I'm a fantasy reader through and through. So, but publishers are not buying fantasy, unfortunately. But I have a feeling once this is all over, we're all going to need to escape to some completely alternate worlds. So, you know, looking at that high world building, high stakes journey type of fantasy, I think is slowly coming back. And hopefully by the time you're finished writing it, will be good.
So for one that I would embrace, I would say like the whole like trope of going on a quest, where the main person has like some type of journey and where they're trying to figure something out, because there's so many like different opportunities and unique things that you could do along the way, and to make different like type of adventures and stuff, and just even like building a whole new world like during that quest and stuff to keep it more interesting. And so I feel like that is a good one, like that even though we see it done a lot, it's one that can be done well still. I feel like I don't read like a ton of young adult fantasy, but I have noticed that a lot of them are very like European medieval settings, and I feel like we just see that a lot done over and over. So if you could like either just create like a whole new world that's not necessarily based off of something that we know here, or even if it's like more leaning, I like some science fiction too, so if it kind of like even leaned more towards that as far as like the whole world that the book is set in, I think that would do better.
I think my favorite trope recently, maybe it's the Star Wars fan in me, but it's the very wise old man who's a little bit crazy, but is also full of truths. I do like that. It's also the tarot reader in me, I love cards like the Hermit, and to an extent the Hierophant. Because I think it's good to show characters like that who are wise and know the truth to such an extent, like they do not care about what people think anymore. And I love it. I love seeing that. I do. I really do like that trope a lot. You can see it to an extent in a lot of magicians in the Game of Thrones universe, to an extent. I don't know if this is necessarily a trope, but I love when authors do this. I think with Tyrion Lannister, I like seeing authors take a character with disabilities and have it empower them in some way. I like empowered disabled characters. That has really appealed to me a lot recently. Like, you know, there's Bran and Tyrion, and this is more TV, but Vikings with Ivar the Boneless, when you have these characters who are, they have to kind of compensate in some way, and they actually become the most interesting people. I really do like that.
My first tip with fantasy is that when you're thinking about the world, think if you have magic in your book, which a fair majority of fantasy does. Someone told me once, think about your magic system like a science system, like a technology system. So when you think about science fiction is very much about the science. The science it doesn't have to necessarily be accurate. It's just got to be plausible enough that your average reader will choose to still suspend their disbelief. Now some genres of sci-fi are harder than others. Like there's some where you've got to be super technically accurate. With fantasy, if you think about the magic as science, the magic has to have rules. So even if it's a loose system, just keep in mind that you want everything to be consistent. You don't want to have a character do one thing and then, to your earlier point about the gadget, do something. You find out that they can do something totally different with their powers. You don't want that. The second thing I would offer with fantasy is that you can get away with a lot more in terms of the characters and what they're able to do. So if you want a character that can fly, you can put a character on the page that can fly. It just has to. The readers aren't necessarily going to question that. What they are going to question is, does the magic system make sense? So you can get away with a lot more with fantasy. So that would be my second tip. And then my third tip with fantasy, something that I've learned over the years is, at least writing urban fantasy, because that's a lot of what I write, is readers like a character that they can really they like characters that they can really understand, that they can get behind, and that they can root for. There's kind of the mantra in fantasy that the good guys always win. I don't know that that should be a hard and fast rule, but you really do want to have a likable character. Like, especially if you have a series, you want a character that readers are going to want to pick up and read over and over again. That's why books like Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files are so popular, because there's a character that readers just absolutely love. And there's two ways you can go about doing that with fantasy. When you think about a character that can use magic, right? The character could either be the best in the world at what they do, or they could be just learning how to use their powers, and the reader is coming along for the ride. So perfect example of that is Harry Dresden. He's a wizard. The charm with Harry Dresden is that he's opening the door, and you can see into the world of wizardry that you would have never known. And that's intriguing to people, especially when you've got a good world building system. But the opposite of that would be another Harry Potter. So the charm of Harry Potter is that he's going to Hogwarts to learn how to be a wizard. And so the reader is learning along with him as he learns to do that. That, to me, has always been a really great example of the two different ways that you can approach fantasy. And if you know that from the very beginning, then you can start to be intentional when you're writing and doing character development about what it is that you want the reader to resonate with the character.
Well, there you have it. Experts giving us fantasy tropes that we can embrace and some that we should avoid. Check the description for links to their work. But what did you think? Do you agree or disagree with their recommendations on what you should do and what you shouldn't do when writing fantasy? Do you have some tropes of your own that weren't shared in the video and you feel a burning desire to share it with the public? If so, put your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to this channel for more expert tips on how to write, publish, and promote your first fiction novel. I'm Marcus, and I'll see you next time. No, seriously, 1/8 werewolf on my uncle's side.